we will give it another minute for people to join the Zoom. So if you can just hang on tight for a little bit. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I would love to thank everyone for coming today. I'm super, super excited to be here. A couple of reminders about kind of where we are at in the week. It's Tuesday, Neuro Across the Diaspora. Yesterday, we had our incredible Black and Neuro roll call where all of you showed up and showed out across all our different social media platforms. If you haven't yet shared your roll call post, it's not too late. We are happy to continue to retweet and amplify all those wonderful introductions, share who you are, where you're at, where you're going, any exciting accomplishments. We can't wait to hype you up on social media. Now, today is Neuro Across the Diaspora, and in addition to our keynote that I'll be introducing in a second, we also have a town hall on the state of the Black and Neuro diaspora. This event will be a little different from our previous events, and it will be open format. And so we really encourage you to join, listen, participate in the discussion. Before we get started today, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you from the lands of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket peoples who are indigenous to these lands. We are all joining this event from different places around the world. So I invite you to take a moment to really reflect on the lands that you're joining from, as well as your relationship to those stolen lands and the indigenous people that have previously and continue to inhabit them. Now, for today, we are about to start one of our amazing keynotes that we have this week, and I'm super excited to announce Dr. Flavia Santos. Dr. Santos is a research fellow at the Geary Institute for Public Policy and a member of the UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab. She's the chair-elect of the Mathematical Cognition and Learning Society and directs the Music and Math Cognition Lab. That's just so cool. I can't wait to hear about it. Her research focuses on factors that influence math learning, learning in the home environment, anxiety around math, and developmental dyscalculia. Dr. Santos leads many things, but just some of them, the Arithmos project, which is funded by the Iris Research Council. So I also, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, and that video has been playing on loop. So we want to just thank them for all of their support, and none of our events would be possible without them. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to the incredible Dr. Santos. We're so excited for your talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here today. I think this event was very important in my life during these 4 years, during the pandemic, during all the events that caused this reunion. So it's really emotional for me. And I also think all of you would relate to this somehow. Sometimes to be the only student in the classroom, or to be the only staff at your department, or going to a conference and do a presentation, and sometimes you see only 2 or 3 people that look like you. So speaking at the Black in Neuro Week is very important because of that. So all Black in Neuro members and allies, thank you so much, Brielle Ferguson, for this invitation. I'm really honored. And I also appreciate the effort of all Black in Neuro organizers for this outstanding conference. So now I will put my slides, and I think we can leave this here. Oh, I suppose you all can see that. Yes, all good? Okay, so let's get started. So, so the talk today, yes? Oh, thank you for the feedback. So the talk today is insights into the neuroscience of gaming, how to uplift maths education. So as Brielle said, it is funded by the Irish Research Council, the main study I will present to you today. So I organized the talk in this structure. So we start talking about discrepancies in maths attainment. Then we'll talk about challenges to digital game-based learning in maths education. I will showcase some of the results we already gathered for the Erasmus project. And I think the most important aspect is this multi-layered approach that's different from other studies. And also this, we will show some insights for digital transformation in maths education overall. So I don't want to have a very heavy talk on theory, but I think some numbers are very important. So 670 million children across the globe are not reaching the levels expected for reading and maths. And when you're looking at a little bit older, like adolescents, teenagers, you realize that the same is happening there. So it means that it's not something that started now, but it's a problem that's coming from previous decades. We also know that boys and girls, they have up to 1.3 times more likelihood of achieving maths knowledge in comparison to girls. And it has nothing to do with capacity to learn, but actually to have opportunities to learn. So why I'm interested in low numeracy? Why is this important? Overall, there are several studies showing that it has a negative impact in the long term. So it's not just the grade, or let's say when the child is in third grade and has some difficulties, it's something that is long lasting. In follow-up studies, like measuring at the age 7, in comparison to the age 42, same group of individuals, they observe they are the ones with lowest scores in mathematics when they are children are the ones receiving lower salaries, having lower occupational status, and that leads to a consequence, because when they are going to have their children, they also will be into this situation of poverty or less resources, and then it will keep going. We also know that low numeracy is quite frequent in girls. There are several reasons for it, but one of them is what we will discuss today, which is maths anxiety. On top of that, we know that the COVID-19 outbreak was worsening this scenario, so increasing the gap in maths learning for the lack of opportunities and mainly lack of access of resources for education. But at the same time, the COVID-19 was a clear response that if you have the right resources, yes, it's possible. And it was clear as well that digital learning is, let's say, the best way to deal with this. So why? First of all, because digital learning is flexible, adaptive, and interactive. So it means that the child can learn at their own pace. They can go back to the topics. They can stay longer in topics they are interested. So it's very easier. It's easier for learning using this kind of resources. Nevertheless, again, although we are convinced based on research that indeed technology can improve global education, we know there are lots of barriers, and we need to talk a little bit about them. So first of all, is affordability. We still see families that cannot buy a laptop, that cannot even pay for internet connection at home. Some families cannot afford the licenses for the softwares that we use on the internet or in other tools. Connectivity is another issue. For instance, in a family that is living in the countryside, in rural areas, there is less likelihood to have broadband or to have access to internet or high-speed internet, which sometimes is crucial for, depending on the resources you are using, they will require this level of connectivity. Then we have the issue of digital literacy, because some parents still not yet, and sometimes even some teachers are not yet prepared to use technology and other resources. So if you don't see the adults helping the kids and supporting the kids in this process, it will lead to more difficulties to learn. The other reason we see as a barrier is the issue of discrimination. This is a very important matter. We will show an example later. And last is the issue of inclusivity. And of course, when we say inclusivity in the first instance, we are considering that all children across the globe should have access or facilities to use internet. But we also know that among them, there are some of the kids that we might have visual impairment, auditory impairment, motor impairment, which will make the experience with technology more difficult or will require adaptations. And again, it comes back to the item number one, which is affordability. It's very expensive to get some systems adapted, especially if you need some of them customized for the specific features of the kids. Well, in developed countries, we are happy to see toddlers like this gorgeous boy interacting with several different gadgets. Most of them will have their own tablets, and they will know how to turn on, how to turn off. They know how to choose music. They can be very autonomous in this situation and very early in life, which gives proficiency and confidence to use technology. Nevertheless, 2/3 of the world's school-age children, and I'm talking about 1.3 billion of children, do not have access to internet in their homes. And sometimes, as you can see in this image, depending on the area, not even at the school. We also know that access to technology is really influenced not just by the financial aspect, but also the cultural aspect. So we know that girls usually have later access to technology in comparison to boys. And apart from that, parents tend to be, let's say, monitoring more their activities in comparison to boys. So this is the scenario in which we are trying to discuss digital technology or digital transformation. And so when we think about digital transformation, we imagine a scenario like this, and that's our hope, that all kids in all countries will have access to different gadgets and interactive ones and resources available to learn. As researchers, we go beyond that. We want to see as well games or digital resources available for health issues. Like this is an outstanding and unique moment in time. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, just released the first prescription treatment for attention and hyperactive disorder in children using digital games. And it's amazing because it can be done at home. It is, let's say, it increases adherence. Kids enjoy the treatment. They don't even think that it is a treatment. So that's what we would like to see in education and in health, a good use of those resources. So let's think about the present time. So we are in 2023, and we know all the things that are ongoing on the news in many countries. So let's think about digital transformation through digital games, game-based learning for improving learning. So we are not here today to discuss other uses. We are not here today to talk about addiction, or any other side effects that some people could consider. We are just exploring the use of game-based learning as an intervention to improve learning process for kids. So I think there are some questions you need to make to yourself and make it then for others as well. So these are the ones. First, does it work for all? Does it work without a tutor? Can you just ask this gorgeous girl, oh, keep working. Is that okay? Even if she has the best of the intentions, is this enough? Does it help or burden teachers? Can the schools implement it? Can it be applied by parents at home to, let's say, reinforce learning? So I think those questions are crucial, because if you think of the different societies we have, and even within the same country, the cultural and socioeconomic differences we see, we can figure out that this is an issue. So here I'm showing you just a few digital games that were designed by researchers, by scientists. And so it means that they had a theory, they had a specific method, they were trying to use a scientific design to test specific questions. So this is not an exhaustive list. There are other games. There are games ongoing under preparation as well. But those are the ones most known and that have more research done to provide evidence. So we can say with all the caveats that, yes, it's something that you could say that it's approved, okay? So why do we think they approve? So based on systematic reviews, we know that direct instruction is crucial, but also assisted instruction. So not leave the child alone. Oh, she or he will figure out by themselves. It's not this way. So focus on arithmetic competences. So it's not just be playful and funny. It has to tackling on arithmetic competences. Intervention should be short, so 1 to 3 months, no longer. And most studies suggest that it should be also adaptive, which means that it increases the level of difficulties according to the performance of the child, or decreases the level if it is too difficult for the child. So really adapted to their level of development. Here, I want to show you one example. This is not my work, but it's something that it was done by a colleague of mine that I admire a lot. Karen Cushion and colleagues did this study. So I think you need to understand how we do it in science. So they created this game, which was the rescue calculars. So you have a rocket, and this rocket is doing some traveling on the space, so visiting different planets, or might have other needs, and they need to calculate many things like the distance or the amount of fuel. And so they create a narrative that is interesting and connected to the images, and they use this number line from 0 to 100. And the child tried to find where, for instance, 47 plus 9 would be located. So the nearest point here. And the study design is very nice, very sophisticated. So they had a baseline for all kids, including neuropsychological measures, fMRI, behavioral testing, like scales, and so on. Then the kids were divided in 2 groups. They have the group with developmental dyscalculia, which is the mathematical learning disorder. So it is something that you will find in the ICD-11 or DSM-5, classified as a learning disorder. So half of the kids with dyscalculia had, it was a crossover study, so half did the training and the other half had the resting. They had a second moment of assessments, and then the groups exchange. So the group who was resting starts to play, the group who was play start to rest. And then all of them did the last fMRI and behavioral scales and so on. So results are interesting. First of all, looking at cognitive aspects. So they see that the percentage of errors in some tasks, like the number line task, decreased with time. And this was observed in controls and in children with dyscalculia. And also the performance in arithmetics, like the accuracy in addition and subtraction, increased after intervention for both groups. But of course, as you can see, the control didn't change much. They were a red on average. But for the children that will show dyscalculia, they increased a little, but still not equivalent to the controls. So it means that they might need further assessment, further intervention, or they might need combined interventions or other aspects to be considered. But anyways, it was only one task. So it's just for you to understand the methodology that I'm mentioning here. And also for you to understand that dyscalculia usually do not meet the average score so easily. It's a disorder that's resistant to treatment and usually still there up to adult life. Now, thinking about the neuroimaging part of the same study, so they ask kids to do an experimental and a control task. So in the experimental task, they would need to see if numbers were in ascending order or descending order, like 7, 4, 2. Or they could do in the control task, which is just to make sure that they were paying attention to the stimuli. So they would say just yes or no if the number 2 was included in the task. So when we're looking at the results, this is the baseline, and you see red is the control group, yes, and blue is the dyscalculia group. And then what you see is that they clearly, even if I don't explain the neuroanatomy or details of the brain areas activated, you can see clearly that they are different. So showing that children with dyscalculia indeed will not activate the same brain areas as the other kids for doing the same tasks. But essentially, we don't see an activation in the parietal lobe, as you can see in the control group, bilaterally, which is very important because parietal lobe is crucial for calculation. And also some activations in the inferior frontal gyrus, which is very important to keep their memory on the tasks. So this is before the intervention. And then after the intervention, remember that we had 2 groups, the group on resting and the group on intervention. So we see clearly that the group that received the training start to have activations on the parietal lobe, which is very important. They also showed, let's say, a compensatory form of activation. So they start to activate the temporal lobe, at least in the right side of the brain, in comparison to the other group that show no evidence of improvements during this period of 5 weeks. So that's how we try to understand how the games work and if they can really produce neuroplasticity. So based on that, we can say that some studies found positive effects of digital game-based learning for improving achievement on learning, but also improving motivational aspects. However, other studies would say that the improvement is there, but it's not larger than the one observed in traditional methods. Nevertheless, it's very difficult to reach a conclusion in this area because we see in most cases methodological issues, different methods used. So we see differences in study design, like not many studies with this control group, experimental group, random, or things like this that allow you to have a better control of the quality of the studies. The game content sometimes is so heavy. They have so many things ongoing in the game that you don't know if it is the color, if it is the sound, if it is the task per se, or what is creating the effect that we are seeing in the studies. Also the age of the participants, because it of course limitates also the level of mathematics you are trying to see improving or not. sample size is a huge challenge in all studies. It's very difficult to keep participants, so attrition rate is very, very problematic. And then how we are measuring effectiveness, because if you're just asking the kids, do you like it? Of course, they will say they do. So it's not that kind of effectiveness we are looking for. We are trying to see if they can learn better or improve their grades or improve their learning experience. And then, of course, depending on the instruments, use it to measure those abilities. However, we see another problem, which is that many studies are, many websites can have unproven games. So what I'm saying here is that sometimes you can have a very well-intentioned developer that has a great idea, create a nice game, but never tested if it actually can really improve learning. And we saw it happening very clearly in the case of older adults. They were trying to create rehabilitation, and we had one case, I think it's well known worldwide, that was promising that older adults would improve. And actually, after an RCT study, we saw that the effect was not there. So that's the biggest problem. So now I will go to the second part of this talk. So I will start talking. I'll start giving you an example of what we are doing in our lab. So before saying that, I want you to know that I had previous experiences. So I worked with the CogMed, the Calcularis, and the 7 spells. I won't have the time to talk about the 3, so I will just talk about 7 spells, which is the most recent study I'm working on. But I want you to understand why or how we reach the point where you are, why we created this multi-layered methodology to use games. Because usually you just see what I told you before. So you test the game and test maximum if it changes brain structures or if at least the motivation of the kids. But we believe that we need more than this, especially if you think about the background that I put to you before starting my talk. So when we did the study with the Calcularis, and I'm comparing Calcularis and 7 spells by the fact that both were interventions for improving mathematics or mathematical learning, I saw some differences in the studies I'm working on. So the Calcularis was individually approached. So each kid would have one tablet. They would be all together, let's say 10 kids in the same room doing the activity at the same time, but each one was doing their own thing without any kind of individual interactions. In the 7 spells, we are approaching an opportunity for the kids play against or with each other. In the Calcularis, the gameplay was off classroom, and you need to bear in mind that we do research according to what ethical committees approve or what the schools are willing to accept for you to do in their school. So in that case, we are not allowed to be in the classroom. Okay, so we had to do the activities in the opposite time of teaching. But the point is, the kids wouldn't see this experience as connected to learning school content. Also, they would not see it, they would see it more like, oh, this is just for fun, and maybe it changed the way they pay attention to what they are doing. As I said, because it was off classroom, so teachers were absent, and the consequence of it is that they are not learning what we are doing, so they are not getting hints of potential approach they could use in the classroom afterwards with in their classes. Another thing that I believe was very important is that for the 7 spells study, we developed a workshop to explain to teachers what we are investigating, why we're investigating, and why is this important for them to know at school. So I think upskilling teachers is very important. I know that teachers are overwhelmed, but they sometimes need special content that they really benefit from. And the last point I would like to mention that we had to bring to the schools, and this in both countries, so in a developing country like Brazil and in a developed country like Ireland, we still need to provide the gadgets. So when I'm talking about digital transformation and the way we are creating this 7 spells study, we are thinking that the intervention must be collaborative, allowing interaction between kids, embedded, so as part of the academic activity, transferable in a way that it becomes sustainable, because if the teacher knows what to do with that or knows how to do something equivalent, then it will be more beneficial for the kids. Must be mindful, because if the teachers are not conscious, and not just teachers, also parents, if they are not conscious of what's going on, what the child needs, they will not support in the way they would like to or they should do. And then, of course, sponsored. We still need to invest more money in education and more resources, because otherwise it's almost impossible. So now I will show you a little bit some things about the Eurythmus project. So Eurythmus is transforming children's mathematical learning through digital games. It's a project funded by the Irish Research Council. It is a partnership between the University College Dublin, where I work, and Technological University Dublin. So the key point for this study is to reduce maths anxiety and to improve maths performance in children. And we are using then this multidimensional approach. So it means that we are not just looking at the kids, we are trying to help children, parents, teachers, and inform policymakers. Our project is well aligned with sustainable developmental goals. So number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4, quality education. 5, gender equality. And 10, reduce inequality. So these are the main ones. I will not have the time to talk about maths anxiety in depth, so I will not explain it in a lot, but I think this article could be extremely useful for your formation. It has a critical view and is very up to date, so it would be an important reference for the topic. But I do want you to keep in mind this clear idea that I'm describing here. So maths anxiety is transgenerational, which means that a child with maths anxiety will grow up and might become a parent or a teacher with maths anxiety, and then the cycle continues. It's present early in life, and by early in childhood, I mean 6 years old, first graders. It was already tested by colleagues, and they found it this clear pattern. So it's very important because it's present very early. It is strongly shaped by culture. So depending on the society's socioeconomic status and views on education, views on the power of women, access to resources to women, you see stronger levels of maths anxiety. And more importantly, it continues throughout life. So it's not that a third grader will have it and it's gone. It's there, and it will impact career choice, like choosing a career in STEM. It will impact admission to the university, especially in many places. We know that admission depends on a maths test, precisely. It will also have an impact on the persistence in the course, because some individuals, they are admitted at the university, but they withdraw. And why? Because there is a lot of pressure. So here, just to give an idea, this is, again, a work of colleagues. So they used fMRI to test groups of individuals. So on top, what you see are the individuals with high maths anxiety. And on the bottom, you see individuals with low maths anxiety, okay? So, of course, it's a subtraction, but what I'm saying is, in individuals with high maths anxiety, what you see activated is the right amygdala, which is one of the crucial areas for experience of fear. but also the right hippocampus, which is the area very important for memories, and especially negative memories in that case. So the child would be remembering negative experiences with maths rather than other things. And by contrast, individuals with low maths anxiety, they are using their brains at the very same time for other things. They are actually activating brain areas connected to calculation, as it is the case of the left ventromedial prefrontal cortex or left intraparietal sulcus in the parietal lobe. So it's clear. So what I'm saying is that it's not a kid pretending that they cannot do things. They actually really are struggling in class. And this is a study that I had the honor of being one of the co-authors, in which we are trying to understand a little bit the mechanisms of this maths anxiety during the development. So here you see we had 79 children, 7 to 12 years old, which is very rare to have a neuroimaging study with so many kids, but we are pleased to have that. And we had the behavioral study and then the neuroimaging study. So in the behavioral study, we found that the higher was the maths anxiety, the lower was the attentional level, working memory levels, and maths achievement. And in the neuroimaging study, we found using voxel-based morphometry, which tried to map the pixels in a very rudimentary way to describe it. So what we saw is that there was a clear pattern as well. So the higher was the maths anxiety, the lower was the lower was the volume of the gray matter in the left anterior intraparietal sulcus, again the same area important for maths, lingual gyrus and pineal cortex, as described in this image here. So what I'm saying is, yes, we know that it is a real thing and we need to sort this. So in our study, we are interested in Ireland, which is a small country in terms of area, has also a small number of inhabitants, so about 7 million. The GDP is 449 billion, so it's the 30th economy across the globe. The country is still very new, so that's why this economy is still growing and going in a nice way. The Human Development Index is very high, so 0.94. And the Gini index is not yet perfect, but it's indicative of lower levels of corruption, which is something good. And the country is currently trying to face other kind of problems, like improve quality of water, develop clean energy, try to act better in climate aspects, and having a more responsible consumption of goods overall. So here I'm showing you the results of Ireland in the PISA study. PISA stands for Program for International Student Assessment. It's organized by the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and it has measurements over time points from 2000 up to 2018. The new one is soon to be released, the most recent edition. So we have here the results for the students for reading, mathematics, and science. And as you can see, the number 500, you have a blue line, which represents the average score of all countries connected in this survey. And the red dots are the points obtained by Irish students. So what we can see is that in reading and science, it's above average, so it's great. In mathematics, it is average. However, other data from PISA study also showed that students in Ireland had higher levels of maths anxiety, including the high achievers, which is something important. So what we are doing in the Arithmus project, like I said, we are trying to address children, parents, teachers, and policymakers. So for the children, we did two things. First of all, we did this video, which let's see if it will play. It should play now. So please scan the QR code and give your like. I think it's very important, your support, because there are some other videos online which are not created with evidence-based information or by scientific groups. And so it's important to ensure that something that is suitable for parents and for kids is addressed. And it's also the first video which was designed especially for kids. It's very short, so I will show you, and also will help you to understand what is maths anxiety in depth and what we see that's important in this project.
Working with numbers makes some children feel nervous, upset, and even scared. It is like there's a monster in there. Luckily, the monster is not real. It is just your mind telling you to pay attention, be careful, and brave. When you learn how to face the monster, you will also get better at maths. Tell your family or your teacher about the monster. You can also write down what it feels like or talk to a friend. If it appears when no one else is around, during homework or in the classroom, take deep breaths, think of something you're good at, and then go back to your maths exercises. The more you face your monster, the smaller it will get, until even if it does appear, you won't be scared anymore. Math makes everything we do better. Scientists use it to discover new things, and astronauts use it to learn about planets and stars. But other people also use maths in everyday life. Builders use it to build houses. Bus drivers use it to make sure they arrive on time. Doctors use it to prescribe medicine. Chefs use it to plan meals. Athletes use it to train. And musicians use it to write songs. These people were once kids like you. Some had monsters around while doing maths, but they tamed their monster to learn the maths. And guess what? You can too.
Okay, so now we can continue. And now I would like to show you the 7 spells, the game that I told you that we are using in this particular project. So first of all, it's a card game developed at Technological University Dublin by Dr. Pierpaolo Dondio and Dr. Mariana Rocha. And this game is, then the main idea is that one player should capture the cards of the other player and must use some math tricks to make it. Like you can see these yellow cards, which have some resources like add 2 or remove table, etc. And those yellow cards are actually the 7 spells. And so this game received a prize in Europe in a conference. That's the one I mentioned here, IGBL 2019 in Cork. And that's the one we are using in our project. So in our research, we are using 5 sessions. So the first session is just for training, so to understand what the game is, what are the rules, how to use all the buttons and so on. The child will then, in the second session, play solo, just really to keep practicing and understanding the rules and everything. Then the third session, they will play with the artificial intelligence opponent, so it might be like Merlin or something equivalent that will be very smart, and it is difficult to play with this character. And then you have the playing with another kids, which is the favorite session of the kids. And afterwards we have a tournament, and again the tournament is anonymous, so we don't know who are playing each one of the sides of the competition. But overall, to explain you, it's the game can be played in 3 training modes, the ones I showed you now. 45 minutes per week, 5 weeks. The progress is measured in real time, so it's easy for the researchers to follow up. And in the future, it will be played from anywhere, as long as the child has a computer attached to the internet. And for those who will have access to the link, it's possible already to do that. So this is a real photo. This is Dr. Mariana Rocha precisely giving the explanation about the games before the session. And then after that, each child will receive their respective tablets. and so on. So far, we have only 230 kids assessed, but we're still doing data collection. And here, just to give you an example of what kind of things we are measuring. It's not, like I said, it's just preliminary finds, but at least you understand. So putting together data from 98 kids, excluding those with neurological and psychiatric and learning disorders from the analysis, not from the experience of playing games. So they were from primary schools in disadvantaged areas of Dublin. And after the exclusions for the analysis, we had 87 children, all of them fourth graders, and we divided them into groups, one that received the training, so the 5 sessions, and the other one which had the business as usual. This is, like I said, is the pilot study. In the real RCT study, we actually have an active control group, not just a passive control group like this. So here is one example of the tasks. We have the SYMP, which is symbolic magnitude processing test. So the child sees 7 versus 4 and must choose the larger number, and could be with 1 digit or 2 digits, and they must do it as fast as they can in a very accurate way. So here, what we see is that for 1 digit, we don't see any difference comparing pre-test versus post-test from trained to untrained groups. They are equivalent because they are fourth graders. It's easy for them to perform this task. But when we put 2 digits, then they need to think about the numbers, not just automatically respond. And then we see that the trained group showed some improvement in the post-test in comparison to the other group. The other task was designed in our lab, developed as well. So we created this computer task in which the child has first an operations like additions, subtractions, etc. Like this, 90 minus 10 equal. So the child must do a mental calculation, and probably they will say 80. And then the second task is to see a number line and positioning the number exactly where it should be. And in our paradigm, we have horizontal and vertical lines, starting from the left to the right, from the right to the left, top, down, down, top. So in this task, also we can summarize findings so far. So here, calculation score and positioning score, we don't see better accuracy after the intervention. However, we could see in both tasks that children that received the training become faster. If you compare pre-test versus post-test, they become faster to respond to both tasks. So that's something very important, because it means that they are become more, they are automatizing more their experience, and they are discriminating better those numbers. So this was just an example for parents, what we are doing. So apart from also sharing the video, which allows them to understand what is maths anxiety, we are also using some questionnaires to develop a future intervention for parents. So here I will give you again just a simple example. So we are asking if parents' maths anxiety would explain numeracy activities done at home, right? So here we have the data from 157 parent and child dieties. So out of 222, and I must say something very important, especially if you are interested in research with children. We had 65 exclusions, okay? Just to summarize, 42 parents did not reply or reply incomplete forms. So it's really a challenge to do research in this area. Most of the responses came from mothers as main carers, so 79%. And this is the educational distribution, educational level distribution of those main carers. So we can see that we had 14% with low education, 20% with intermediate education, and 66% with high education, because it's a developed country. So that these are the numbers. And here, just another example, I'm selecting a single scale to show you. So attitudes towards maths. So parents had these 4 questions. I enjoy maths activities. I avoid situations involving maths, which in punctuations is reversed. I was good at math. and my job is related to math. So you have all those options from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And you see clearly that 70% of parents said they avoid situations involving maths. So if parents are not doing, they are avoiding, how can they help the kids in the homework? How can they stimulate maths learning, maths knowledge at home? So it's very important. And then the last part is that for teachers here. So we developed this Teachers Maths Anxiety Classroom Management workshop. This workshop was already presented in different forums. So I had the pleasure to present it in Cambridge, in Hong Kong, in Malta, and in different places in Dublin, including the Institute of Physics, because the physicists, they are also concerned about how their students are doing the calculations for physics. So it's very interesting. And of course, we did the presentation in several schools. So here, just to give an idea what we are talking about in this workshop. So we present concepts, symptoms, neurobiology, and demographics of maths anxiety across the globe. We show effects of maths anxiety on maths performance. So like I was saying before, it impacts career choice, it impacts retention at the university or even the career afterwards, the long-term impact, and also something that's very important and less commented. Now it's becoming known, especially for us in education, the anxiety about teaching maths. So when the teacher is there to help the kids to learn, even if they love mathematics, they might be anxious when they are teaching, and the child might somehow capture those feelings or those negative experiences. And then again, we show approaches that are suitable for child, teacher, and families to deal with maths anxiety. So overall, based on the findings I showed so far, children enjoyed playing with each other in their Richmos project using the gameplay. Parents' education and attitudes towards maths will have an impact on children's scores in mathematics. I didn't show this in detail, but it was one of our findings. Teachers shared their experiences after the workshop, so they were more confident to come to me and say, hey, I feel anxious when I need to teach division in classroom. 7 spells improved symbolic magnitude performance, and 7 spells increased speed in calculation and number line tasks. So for policymakers, and that's already the let's say, very, very end of this talk, for policymakers, we wrote this policy paper, which is available online. So you just scan the QR code, but if you just put the title, you will also find it on Google easily. So a child with maths anxiety might become a parent or a teacher with maths anxiety. The title says many things already. So I'm just showing you the list of recommendations we put in this policy paper. So increasing awareness concerning maths anxiety for children, parents, and teachers, this is crucial. Reducing gender and race stereotypes related to maths learning and maths performance. I think this is very, very important. Reinforcing maths learning support for preschoolers and first graders, because like I said before, if a first grader starts to have maths anxiety, it's too late already for changing it. So you need to make them enjoy learning maths, and that's the most important. Avoiding putting students under pressure. I know that we needed timed tasks. It's inevitable in society, in culture, etc. But there are ways to do that in which it doesn't become something so stressful for the kids. And this is not just my idea. If you look at the Finland system of education, they find ways that there's no exams, no assessments in early life, early school life. Cultivating motivation to learn maths and confidence in students' ability in classroom. I think this is very important. Growing self-efficacy. So the child must first of all believe that they can do it. If they think, oh, it's too difficult, they will not even try, they will not keep trying, they will not become resilient to the difficulties. And this is even more important for students from disadvantaged areas. In fact, talking about disadvantaged areas, we believe that it's also important to go back when they are teenagers and give incentives for them when they are trying to do the admission exam to enter at the university. In the PISA study, it was observed that in Ireland, even students which are high achievers, but coming from disadvantaged areas, they do not dream, they do not believe that they can go to the university. So they are not even trying. It's very serious. And then, like a recommendation from UNESCO given last year, which is to equip teachers with continuous performance development, like the one I showed, the workshop we developed for understanding maths anxiety about teaching maths. And last item is offering, of course, for those which actually have maths anxiety in serious levels, they need therapy. And we are still investigating ways to treat it better, but at least cognitive and behavioral therapy are, let's say, the sound option we have so far. So in terms of future directions, I would like to say that sometimes I feel like an imposter when I say that I'm a neuroscientist, because if you are well-trained, like I was well-trained when I did my PhD, but after that, when you get your first job or your postdoc, if you are going to a place that has no resources, you do not use what you learned. And neuroscience changes too fast, and I spent a long while without being able to use neuroscience tools. Fortunately, now our university has a new lab with lots of resources, so we can do pupillometry and ERP studies to understand the mechanisms that are explaining the performances in mathematics and help us to find ways to use it in interventions. And also we are interested to use transcranial random noise stimulation, which is a non-invasive brain stimulation, to use interventions to see if we can help. We can not just help, but ensure that what we do has a prolonged effect in their brains. And that's exactly why TRNS seems to be the most appropriate. So last slide. If you really want to see digital transformation, and if you think about the state of art, this is where we are now. So globally, digital transformation is still incipient. Digital revolution is not an autonomous process. It demands a lot of human beings to make it happen. Digital intervention relies on human factors. So if you don't have the idea of humans doing it, you might be in trouble as well. And digital intervention, actually based on research, can support maths learning. So these are the individuals that are working in the Arrhythmus project, COPI, and other collaborators, also our master and PhD researchers, which are amazing and contributing a lot for this project. And I just would like to say thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to hear if you have any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santos. Wow, what an incredible talk. Where do we start? It was just so poignant when you were talking about math anxiety being a barrier to entry for all of these other fields. That's something that resonates so much with me as someone who, growing up, never saw myself as good at math. I think because of that, it made it difficult not just to picture myself as someone who did math well, but also as a scientist and all these other careers where math is really inherent to being able to do the work. And so I loved how the video that you showed kind of tackled some of those biases and showed that many of us are doing math in all these really little ways and don't realize the ways that it contributes to all these things that we can do and that it can be really fun. So very excited to see how the work continues to progress and follow your path. Thank you so much. We are a bit short on time, so we have time for just one question. We have two questions in the Q&A. You already touched a little bit about the neuroanatomy of math anxiety, so we will move on from that one, but we had another question about the heritability of math anxiety. Do we think it's something that can be passed on? Might there be a genetic basis, or is it something that comes up through our environment or developmental plasticity?
Yes, a short response is biopsychosocial. You definitely have some biological aspects because you see some links with general anxiety, although they still being separate concepts and separate conditions. And but you have cultural aspects as well, like in cultures in which you see lower empowerment of women, poverty, you see higher levels of maths anxiety. This is the PISA study that compares more than 60 countries, put a big plot I didn't show today, which is clear. The poor countries are on the right side with higher levels of maths anxiety, and the developed countries are in the left or in the middle with they still have anxiety, but less levels of anxiety in comparison with other countries. So it is biopsychosocial.
Thank you. And then I had a question. You talked about one of the biggest challenges of the work being getting people to remain engaged in the study and people to continue to answer the questions and prompts. So how are you thinking about that moving forward? Because I'm sure you are losing such a big amount of your sample, and I'm sure that's a lot of important information.
Well, that's a problem that has no solution, because especially we have a very restrictive ethical committee, which is really clear of what we can do and what we cannot do. So you don't even enter in the school without having your guard of vetting. And if the head of the principal is not agreeing, sometimes they do not even let you talk to parents. They will be the intermediators. And then it means that if it is a principal that is very engaged in the project, very excited about the project. We had a case, the principal was phoning parents one by one, the ones that were not replying. And then we send, we had digital versions, and we send printed versions, because probably was also associated with difficulties with access to internet and so on. So we do things to overcome, but there are some limits. And that's why what we do in research is ensure that you calculate your sample size very carefully, and you make sure to account for attrition, let's say minimal 30% of attrition, because it will happen. It's inevitable, really.
Yeah.
But I also believe that if you have a good publicity of the work, then in some point the population start to change their mindset, because like I said, because it's a country that is starting to grow now in the last, I don't know, 50 years. So now people are becoming more educated to understand the value of research and making room for contribute for science and so on.
Thank you so much. We'll end with a comment. We had the comment that incredible talk. As a mom neuroscientist, this affirmed my decision to use supervised digital learning to assist my toddler's reading and math literacy. So you're out here impacting people. People are very grateful for your work. So with that, I'd like to thank Dr. Santos for her incredible talk. You've given us so much to think about. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I think this was a really incredible introduction to our day, Neuro Across the Diaspora, where we're hoping to shed light on experiences of folks around the world. It can be really easy to focus on the US, UK, and Canada, but Black in Neuro is a global community. And so today we're focusing on the experiences and contributions of people who work in or are from places outside of those regions. If that applies for you, we would love for you to share your experience using the hashtags Neuro Across the Diaspora and Black in Neuro World. And we will retweet, engage, and share those stories on social media. As a reminder, today's event and all of our events are available on our YouTube page. If you haven't yet joined the conversation on social media, we are at Black in Neuro across all platforms. For the most up-to-date information on the conference, check out the conference booklet or our website. Thank you again to our conference sponsors. Big thanks to our ASL interpreter today, and we can't wait to see you at the rest of our events throughout the week. Thank you so much for coming.